Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live Japanese tea sessions. My name is Simona, and I'm the president of the Global Japanese Tea Association. Today, I'm really glad to have you join in because we have a special guest. Ian Chun is joining us from Tokyo. So we will have about an hour time to chat with him. And if you have any questions or would like to make any comments, you can use the chat. Let's get started. Hello, Ian.
Hi,
Hi, good
how
to
are
see
you?
you. I'm very good. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. Trying to set up.
You're in Tokyo now, isn't it?
Yes, we moved. My family and I moved to Tokyo last July. So
Okay.
it's a
Busy place.
it's a different lifestyle than I've been leading, most certainly. So
I can imagine. So, just for the people that will be listening to us, would you like to introduce yourself on what you do? I'm sure many people already know you, but just in case to catch up on that.
so my name is Ian Chun. I am the CEO of a company called Matcha Latte Media. And we run Yunomi.life. It's a website that seeks to be kind of a platform for small scale Japanese tea producers as well as producers of other types of products from Japan. And I got started in the tea industry about 10 years ago with Matsumoto-san of Obubu and the Global Tea Association, Global Japanese Tea Association. So he brought me into the industry basically.
Wow. Actually, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you. I know that you have been working with tea for a long time, but when did you get interested in? Was that the meeting with Matsumoto that brought you in, or were you already exploring tea before that? Down the memory
I've been
lane.
playing with this idea of it was actually very coincidental. It was never meant to be related to tea specifically. Um, so I guess, I moved to Japan for the very first time in 1999. I'm originally from Hawaii. I was a college student at Brown University at the time and studying Japanese literature. And I moved to Japan after graduating from college and was living in Japan. And this was about, the early 2000s was when um, matcha flavored products started becoming very popular in Japan. And so you would see, I guess Starbucks started it, but you would see matcha latte products in lots of different cafes. So as I was working in Japan, I would go to cafes very often and drink matcha latte. And my background is actually in literature.
Oh,
So
okay.
I
I
think
didn't
when
know.
I think about things, I think a lot about what they represent. And so matcha latte to me kind of represented the amalgamation of the combination of Western and Japanese societies or
Mhm.
cultures. Much so that was always a kind of a running theme in my life, and I thought that it was a great metaphor for doing something related to Japanese culture in terms of work. So that that concept existed before I had met matcha and before I got interested in tea. Um, so when I met Matsumoto-san, it was kind of an interesting story because my wife wanted to do an MBA in the United States, so I quit my job to follow her and support her, and I wasn't doing anything at the time. So and I had a background in e-commerce, so and this was in 2009 before all of these systems came about. So when we were in my previous company, we had to build our own systems for e-commerce. There wasn't something that existed already. And so when Matsumoto-san, when I met him, a friend had introduced me to him, and I'd met him when he was in Hawaii, running the Honolulu Marathon in his samue and carrying the Obubu
Awkward.
flag as he was running the marathon. And I met him, and we met him in his hotel room for the very first time, and he was telling me about tea, and I tasted kabuse-cha for the first time.
Mm.
And so we were tasting the kabuse-cha, and he gets up on the bed, and then he gets up on the table, and he's like, "Yes, this is kabuse-cha." And I'm like, "Okay, this is really
Sounds
cool."
familiar.
So yeah, and so I spent a lot of time talking to him over the next couple of months about the tea industry, learning about tea, and I decided to help him with expanding Obubu's program, Obubu's business outside of Japan,
Mhm. So
which
that's okay.
until yeah, so and in the process of helping him, launch obubutea.com for the very first time, and um, establishing Obubu's brand online, I learned a lot about not just tea, but also about the tea industry. And I think what really got me interested in doing tea as a business was Matsumoto-san and his passion for helping the tea industry, tea farmers promote themselves around the
Mm.
world.
So
And so
it,
that's really,
yeah,
the idea of a global Japanese tea association is I'm glad that it occurred.
so when you describe it, it sounds like you had very different backgrounds and very different experiences, but now everything kind of comes together, and it sounds like everything is really useful, both the literature background and the experience with e-commerce, and then the interest in tea to come together and build Yunomi. So how did you get the courage, or how did you get the idea to actually go and do it on your own? You said you have been helping Obubu, but at what point you thought that it was time for you to do it your own way, to start Tsunami?
Okay, so this is actually not related to tea per se. I had a friend who was starting businesses, and he had mentioned to me that like why he so I'm sorry, he wasn't starting businesses, he was starting a startup, which is a little bit different.
Okay.
And so he was like, and so I was talking to him about this idea of what is a startup and what's the difference between a startup and a business. And he told me, and this remains to me to this day, like he told me that he wanted to not just work, not just earn money, not just create a business and have control over his life. What he wanted to do was create impact, have an impact on society, have an impact on a specific industry, um, have a something, do something that really changes the world that in some way. And so, in order to do that, you need to do it with some amount of scale at the very least, or at least either scale or influence. And so that was the idea and the what drove me to decide that I wanted to do a start my own business, um,
Mm.
and then start my own business in a way that creates not just a tea business but helps the entire industry out. And that was the reason why I have why Yunomi is the way it is now, instead of just a instead of a tea business that is more understandable and more manageable and more profitable to.
Yeah, it sounds from what I've know from talking with you, that Tsunami is very unique model and very unique setup, and I really want to hear more about it. I think others as well. But just before that, we have a few comments in our chat. So Jose and Patrick have joined us. Please say hello. And Tiffany is asking what we are drinking. So I guess I just saw you lift a cup, so why don't you go first?
So I wanted a lot of. I don't want to like as you talk, you get you have to drink a lot. So I was just trying to figure out what is a good way to have a lot of amount to drink during this interview. And I just got a French press because my wife likes coffee, but I used the French press
Wow,
to make
so green.
matcha, which I was just kind of curious to see what would it be like.
So how does it
And
work? You just add the powder, the water in?
yeah, so what I did was I added the powder and I just kind of like do this, and
Okay.
it mixes it up. It's not meant to be like good matcha. You get the flavor. So I make it's made to be diluted. It's made to be more like a thick green tea rather than a matcha. So that's kind of my purpose in doing this. But it works pretty well in terms of something very easy to do very quickly. It's cold brewed. Um,
Mixing again the worlds of tea and coffee.
yeah, so like so I'm very interested in exploring, both learning about. At first, I was very interested in learning about how things are done traditionally, but I've been in this for like 10 years now, so I kind of okay, I know how it's done traditionally. How can we do it in a different way, and what happens to it? So, and there have been times definitely that oh my goodness,
Just to show to
it,
everyone that
it
Seth is commenting.
did not work. There's times when things did not work at all, but sometimes it works. Yeah, so this works. This
No,
works
it's,
pretty well.
it's definitely good to explore new ideas. I think later on also I had some questions about the situation in Japan and how this kind of traditional way of making tea is slightly going away, and there is a need for new methods, for new something new and exciting. And I think it's great to try out and see different possibilities and merge different worlds, coffee and tea, wine and tea, or all of that. Yeah.
Hmm. Definitely.
Uh, so I would like to hear a little bit more about Yunomi. So you told us the story of how you got inspired and how you started, and over is it 10 years already or roughly?
So I've been doing this. I've been in the tea industry for 10 years since I started helping Obubu out.
Mm,
So Obubu had I started helping Obubu out, and then not as an employee, as a consultant, which I only charged Obubu what we made, like a percentage of what I actually made for Obubu, and so we got it up to a pretty good scale. And but at that point, like it wasn't enough for me. It wasn't enough for me to live on.
mm,
So what we did was, and then there were other farmers that Matsumoto-san had introduced me to, and they also were interested in what I was doing with Obubu. So I started making websites, online stores for them, and then in 2013, after I started incorporated the business, I decided that it would be interesting to uh, consolidate. There were two ways that I could have done this. We could have created a system like Rakuten where every single um, every single online store was operated separately.
mhm.
We could have created something like Shopify or like Yahoo stores, or the alternative. And I don't think that I could have done that anyway. But the alternative was to consolidate it into one single brand. And so when I thought about like what is the best thing for the farmer or the producer who is running a website or whose website I was running for them, if we're going to sell more of their product, what we need to do is, it doesn't make sense to um, dilute the brand recognition of all of these different companies. And not only that, I would get inquiries for or wholesale inquiries from multiple different people who are contacting each website separately. And every time they contacted the website, they would get me. And so it becomes kind of awkward because I'm supposed to be operating those websites separately. So if you contacted Obubu for a wholesale order, and then I contacted you, And then you contacted, Kurihara-san for a wholesale order, and then I contacted you. You're talking to the same person, but we're having two different
That's funny.
conversations.
Japanese team
So that
means
was
yeah.
it was very weird after a while. And it's like, oh, Ian, Obubu has a guy named Ian working for them too. Um, so I decided to consolidate into one brand that manages multiple sources of tea, and I decided to focus only on producers, or primarily on producers, because I was thinking about, what is the value that retail, other brands who are not producers adds to the product, and sometimes they do add a lot of value. People who are just buying and selling the teas do add a lot of value in terms of informing the customers about the teas, and sometimes they don't add very much value except that they have nice packaging. So when I think about who I'm going to represent, that's what I think about. Is there any meaning to having multiple layers of people in the supply chain? And if there is meaning, then yes, we should bring them on. So Yunomi, is never meant to be a concise tea brand per se. It was meant to be more like a marketplace. And in 2014, I had actually attempted to make it into a real marketplace where Obubu or Naturality could manage their products themselves. But the larger that we get, and the more customers and more orders that we got from around the world, it was becoming very difficult to have everybody manage the products themselves. In particular, most of their business was happening in Japan, so the amount of time that they could dedicate to their products on Yunomi was very limited. And people also want to purchase products from different suppliers and get it shipped at once. So that made more sense for us to aggregate the products into one location and then ship out from one location.
And right now
Um,
you work with over 100 producers and artisans, right? How does that
yeah, I think there's about
coordination work for you?
170. I think there's about 170 right now, and if you've shopped on Yunomi before, you notice that there's a pre-order button if there's no product in stock, and the pre-order button has a little pop-up message that says it takes 3 to 6 weeks. Primarily, it's because I am doing the procurement. I'm analyzing like how many products we need, how many items we need of that specific product, and then all of the items that we could get from that specific supplier, and then I produce a procurement order, and I order it from the supplier. And
Yeah,
so that's taking up a lot of time. And so I have from 100, it's a 1,500 products in 5,000 variations of sizes, etc., sizes and colors, and then 170 suppliers. So it gets very, very complicated. And in terms of managing all of this, the inventory for that, um, it gets very complicated to manage the inventory and then produce English language labels for all of the products. And
it
so
sounds,
I am at the point where we're kind of at the breaking point. We need to do something to change how we do things.
the way you describe it sounds like a massive company, something like Amazon, with a large warehouse and so
Yeah,
on. But I know that your team is not so big, right? It's a few people managing this all together.
right. So it is a bit of inefficient right now, and Um, but in terms of concept, like a business concept, the concept that I follow is actually Amazon's business model. In
Mhm.
terms of, how are we going to manage a large number of products, and ship it in a way that saves consumers money. I'm not trying to get it to them as quickly as possible. We're gonna, leave that bit of a service for later. And I'm not trying to allow like any type of product to come onto the website.
So,
not anybody can sell their products to us, or we won't buy from just anybody.
so Ian, if I can just step in here, we actually have a question about this from Seth, who was
Okay.
asking, what is your process of deciding which teas to offer? Do you have a screening process?
So the screening process is a review of, first of all, so there are two main criterias. Is the person who wants to sell on Yunomi, like they don't have to be a producer specifically. I obviously you can, if you look on the website, farmers get kind of preferential treatment. Producers are also, there are a lot of producers, but there are also some sellers. So that's not the specific criteria. Um, However, the one thing that I need to know from the company, as well as the person who's managing, who I'm dealing with in the company, there needs to be a sense of passion for the product that they're making. If it's tea, obviously you need to have a passion for tea. If it's a kyusu or a teapot or some other type of product, there has to be some obvious feeling of passion for the product that they're making or they're selling. So that's one criteria, and that comes with meeting the person, or it comes from reviewing their activity online, their website, their social media activity, and you can kind of you can basically tell how passionate people are by reviewing their either their website or social media, or meeting them in person.
Okay.
Obviously, some people who can't based and then there are some people who are very clear cut business. It's all business, and they don't really know about that much about tea. And this could be I've met farmers who are, like fifth generation farmers, and it's pretty obvious that they have real no passion for tea. It's just something that they inherited. Um, and you can tell that sometimes when you talk to them. And you can sort of tell that even if they have a very slick website, you can tell that they are not particular. It's a very like somebody else produced it for them.
Mhm.
Um, so,
I've
so
met
that's one
some
thing, passion.
tea farmers also. I met one tea farmer who was producing tea, but liked drinking coffee more than the tea he was making. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, that happens. I mean, if like if you inherited your farm, if you inherited the business, you may not necessarily, like it that much. And so I think that's one reason why a lot of children with a lot of people who would have inherited their farms decide not to do farming. They close down their farms, or they sell off the land, or they sometimes, in some cases, they just leave the land to become forest again. um, it's we have the benefit of being in a modern society and a developed economy is that it gives people the freedom of choice, and that's great. But that also means that a lot of family businesses that have occurred for gone on for centuries, there's possibility that it won't survive because there's no one to inherit it, which is sad on one hand, but it's okay on the other hand. It would be great if there is a way for somebody outside the family to inherit whatever the business is or the
There
farm.
are some newcomers in tea
Yeah,
farming.
like people who are passionate, so give them a chance.
Yeah.
um,
So,
the other main criteria is that the tea quality and the price has to be there has to be a what's the word? The price to quality ratio has to be acceptable. Like you can't take a really cheap tea that's cheap on the market and jack up the price and say that it's a really high quality tea. It's not, because you can't do that. If you're going to try to do that, and I've had people who come to us and tried to do that,
Yeah, that's not so good.
Or even some company with matcha that was really not very good, and the price that they offered was really high for that quality. And there are sometimes reasons why that could happen, and that's acceptable. For example, if it's a very very small farm producing in a very very small quantity and producing some very something that's doing something interesting with it, and the quality that results is not necessarily equivalent to the market price, they can they're allowed to have a premium on their tea because of those aspects of it, besides the flavor. But if it's a mass-produced tea that somebody has produced, that's procured or gotten somehow, and they're trying to promote it as a very high quality product, then that's not acceptable. So those are my criteria. Otherwise, I would sell basically. I would try to pick a a selection of the teas that are offered by a single producer and put it up online.
So Greg is
Um,
saying interesting. What you're describing. Um,
so like it's not a curated selection of products like the way that most tea companies are. It's a
mhm.
curated selection of producers, I would say.
And I feel that is really important what you described to actually find the people with passion who would be interested and invested in making quality teas and introducing them around the world. With your experience and with your range of products, I wonder if you see some trends, what is more popular and whether that has been changing throughout the time that you have been working.
Sorry, you got you were frozen for a second.
So I was just asking, through the time that you have been working with tea, have you seen what is popular right now and whether that has changed from the early days?
Oh yeah, I would say obviously matcha has become very very popular, and from our point of view as English speaking people, you would say that it's become popular because of the global boom in matcha. Actually, I don't think it is the reason. I don't think that's the reason for the increase in popularity for matcha, or increase in production quantity. Um, the the prevalence of matcha products in the Japanese market and domestic market, I think matcha flavored products has increased a lot. I think many more companies are producing matcha flavored products, and that matcha is that has driven tencha or producers to switch to producing tencha or in a very large quantity. Like many producers or farmers are switching to tencha production, and that has occurred over the last couple of years. I think maybe the last 5 years or so. Um, I think I think that tencha production side of the industry, as it has grown, and it's still very a small percentage of the industry, maybe like I want to say like 5% of the tea produced in Japan is tencha or leaf that's maybe not strictly considered tencha, but is used to make like low grade matcha. Um, that type of leaf has increased by maybe from like from maybe like 1,000. This is like a very rough number, but like
Yeah.
1,000 to 4,000 tons, which is about 5% of the total production in Japan. And so that's quite a bit. And I think that's the only category in Japanese tea that is growing significantly. The
Mhm.
other significant category that I see that is growing, not significantly, but it is growing, is the production of black tea. And so, and that's yeah, black tea. Yeah.
That's what I'm drinking right now.
The and it's still a very small amount. It's like a couple hundred tons, I think. Um, and at one point in Japan, Japan's history, Japan produced a lot of black tea. Now the black tea in Japan, I think maybe there are a couple hundred. farms producing it, and there are maybe probably still less than 1,000 tons of black tea that's being produced in Japan. But I think a lot of farmers, especially smaller scale farmers, are switching to black tea production because um, the green, particularly for summer harvest, the summer harvest does not fetch a lot of a high price at the market. So the amount of work that's necessary going into summer is worth less. It's not worth the time for many small scale farms. So they are switching to producing oolong and black teas instead of producing summer harvested green teas. And one of the reasons for this is also because of I think because of the increase in matcha, the demand for matcha and like low grade tencha. Um, the the because it is a matcha is a product that is like a, what is it called, like a third tier product or something. No, like it's the tea is farmed, it's processed, it's refined, then it's ground. So it's a derivative product or a post processed product, and so the um, and it's primarily bought by very very large companies like Nestle producing Kit Kat, and therefore the price for it is very low. So it's even lower than the price for regular sencha that's going into the market. So there's no, for small scale producers, there's not really a real reason to try to do all that work for a very little bit, a small amount of money. So they've been getting into producing black teas. So those are the two main things that I've seen in the industry over the last couple of years.
And yeah, related to what you were saying about the farmers switching to making more tencha, we have a question from Greg asking whether that switch requires a substantial investment of money and labor. What do you think?
I mean, you do need to purchase the plastic coverings to cover your fields, and then you need to cover your fields. So that is more labor intensive and for a brief amount of time. It's very labor intensive or capital intensive if you're a farmer who's just farming and you're not actually processing anything, you're selling your tea leaf to a processing factory, then that's what you need to do, and that's the investment you need to do. And those tend to be very, very small farms, like family farms who don't process on their own. They're not big enough to process on their own. So for that scale of farm, it is quite a big investment, I think. For a larger scale farm that might own their own factory, the next question is, are you going to process the tea yourself in your own factory? And if you are, you're going to need a special factory for that. Although there is a way, maybe I shouldn't talk about it, but there is a way to process your leaf using the sencha machines to get a leaf that resembles tencha. And that leaf is primarily used for like industrial grade matcha, so it doesn't get into the market very much. I hope it doesn't. So is it intense? Is it substantial? Not really. So a lot of companies, a lot of like small scale farms are switching to tencha production. So you see that, I think, in Shizuoka a lot.
And I also wanted to add, so for the small farmers, I think it's relatively, like you said, easy. But I've also, from personal trips, have seen that a lot of slightly larger farmers are building tencha factories. So all around Japan and Kagoshima and Kyushu, several areas in Shizuoka, it's really a boom right now. So it's interesting to see what we will have a few years later when all of them are in operation.
Well, I've heard that the equipment manufacturers are making a killing exporting their equipment too. So
True. Yeah.
I believe JICA. Did you hear that JICA helped the Kenya Tea Association to procure procure equipment to produce tencha in Kenya. I think.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I think they helped fund it. They helped fund so that Kenya, I think, will either has or will have a tencha factory soon. And I don't know what type of the product they're going to get out of that, but it's very interesting to see that these factories are expanding around the world.
And
So
I
what
kind of I want to
happens?
ask you, maybe it's a little more rhetorical question, but I wonder what you think about the teas that have the Japanese names like matcha or sencha being made, outside of Japan, on all of these programs to train the tea farmers in other areas to make the Japanese sounding teas over there.
I think well, that's a hard question. I think that it is a good thing that so in any how do you say this? If the size of the market expands, then that is good for the entire industry. So if we wanted Japanese style tea to become a larger percentage of the global tea market, then we would need other countries to get involved, because even at its height, Japan only produced like 100,000 tons of tea, and Japan, it's just a sheer matter of scale. Like there's not enough land in Japan, there's not enough people, it's too expensive. So they, in terms, and 100,000 tons of tea is Japanese tea is like what 2%, 1 to 2% of the global tea industry. So it's nothing, right? If we wanted Japanese tea as a style to become more mainstream, then other countries need to be producing it. It would be great if Japanese companies were involved. And I think, for example, Japanese companies are involved in developing the industry to grow and produce matcha in China. Like Shizuoka company is they're involved in developing and making Chinese matcha better. And so that will happen. And if that happens in a way that grows the industry, that's good. And that will, so there's and the flip side of that is that it will definitely put pressure on the Japanese tea industry itself. And I think that will that be the primary reason that the Japanese industry declines? I don't think so. I think the primary problem facing the Japanese industry is that the people working in it are older, and so there's an age problem and a decline in population problem that will not be solved by this. Actually, it could, a larger market for Japanese tea in general could help people get into the tea industry in Japan, or encourage young people to get into it.
Brand,
but there's also price pressures too. So how you survive as a company, as how any individual's company survives, it'll make it much more difficult for any one company to survive. And I think that what will happen in the industry is that, or two things need to happen in the industry in Japan, is that we need to have more corporate farming at large mass scales in order to compete with these other farms around the world. And at the same time, the small farms that are not at a corporate scale, they need to focus on very, very high quality to maintain the high standards of Japanese tea. And those companies, those small farms and small producers, will be at the top of the pyramid, and they'll make a large. They should be making very high profit off of their
Mhm.
products, as being at the very, very top.
Mhm.
So you would have like a pyramid where this top is small and then this bottom part is large, and the middle part is actually probably will be filled in by um, um, yeah, I don't know what happens to the middle actually. Mm,
But
but
looking right now, at least to me, Japanese tea feels very fragmented. So there are a lot of small scale farmers, but not as much of what you described, these larger scale farms and cooperatives that could do scale production. Um, have you been involved with any of them, or I assume you are mostly connected with the smaller scale farmers that focus on the quality primarily.
yeah, yeah. I am mostly concerned with the smaller scale producers. I do know a bit about what is happening in other places, though, in terms of like trying to produce larger scale. And it is, like it is large scale. I think it's, a single farm can be managing, be able to produce like hundreds of tons of tea, which I think you in Kyoto you would never see. I don't know if there are any farms in Kyoto that can produce like 500 tons of tea. Um, but I think in Kagoshima that that exists,
Yeah.
um, and that is going to. I think that is going to be more common, or there's going to be a lot of consolidation, primarily because the older farmers are going to retire, and there's no one to take over their fields. So the younger farmers who um, are able to and willing to expand in terms of size will be able to easily take over other people's fields and rent the field, and increase their size and increase their scale. So there will be a lot of consolidation, and I see that even among my own small
Mhm.
scale farmers, they are consolidating. For example, one farm in Kyoto, for example, like they used to be part of a eight to 10 family cooperative, and now they're the only family that's left. So they've taken over everything else, and they're at a much larger scale now than they were before. And that will happen. So consolidation, and in terms of creating more larger scale, you would have you would have like these super large corporate farms, but you also have like these medium-sized farms that are much bigger than small family farms were before.
Mhm.
And part of that is, actually part of that is, agricultural policy from the Ministry of Agriculture, and changes in policy and law have encouraged this throughout agriculture in general in Japan, not just in the tea industry. Um, yeah. So, what was your question?
Just yeah, just thinking about the general situation of Japanese tea right now and the possibilities for the future. As you were saying, there are quite a few challenges that the industry is facing with the aging population, the falling prices. So, what does the industry have to do to move forward and to give us the teas that everyone enjoys drinking? So, I think these are all the questions
Mm,
that I'm thinking all the time about, and I'm really worried 10 years later what we will have, how it will all look. So it's interesting to hear from you as well, since you have been working with the tea a little longer and have more wider reach, I feel, wider connection across the
mm.
regions, across the different levels. So it's just interesting to hear your thoughts about it.
And the smaller farms the smaller farms who are producing high quality tea, they need to be able to, and this is what I'm most concerned with. Like they need to be able to have a way to sell more directly to the consumer, and be able to capture a greater value of the product that they're selling. If they are only selling to wholesalers, who are then selling to companies, who are then selling to distributors, who are then selling to consumers, then the amount that the farmer gets is very small, which is, could be okay if the scale is large enough. enough for them to live off of, enough for them to prosper. But as the industry changes, as the demand for tea decreases in Japan, um, the amount that they're going to get from wholesalers is going to decrease and decrease. So you can see like if you look at a chart of average price in Japanese tea, it used to be like 3,000 yen per kilogram, and now it's like 1,500 yen per kilogram. So you can see like the steady decline in the wholesale price of tea on average. Um,
It's like, yeah,
yeah,
what you
so
say, I feel it. I also noticed that the farmers are becoming more open to kind of step outside of the system and try to reach the customers directly. But of course, that brings a lot of challenges. So the time needed,
right,
the
right.
expertise, and all of that. And I feel that Yunomi is in the right place to actually help these farmers that want to go a bit more independently and a bit more directly. And I had another question, that you mentioned that it was quite also challenging to work with over 170 different producers and craftsmen. But what do you see the most rewarding from that work? That involves a lot of challenges, a lot of hard work. What is the rewarding side of it for you?
Actually, what I'm in the process of doing right now is developing a system that will allow farmers and producers who are apply to sell on Unomi, or apply for us to manage their product. Basically, we will still continue to buy and sell their product and take on the inventory risk. But I'm creating a system for them to apply, and then they can then submit their products for us for consideration. And my goal is to be able to create a catalog of 1,000 producers, with 10 to 20,000 products. They will probably not all be Japanese tea, and they would be, and of course, there are farmers who produce tea, but they also produce other things at the same time. So, like they might produce rice and miso, and they might grow, yuzu, for example. So those products should also be sellable. Um, and so, like working with, it's one thing to work with one farm and get to know them very, very well. When I get to do this idea of a sort of a curated marketplace, um, that does prevent me from getting to know any one farmer very, very well. And up until this point, I've been able to do that. And that will be harder to do, I think, in the future, for me personally, to get to know any one farmer very, very well. But I also think that it will, if we're able to do this successfully, and fund um, employee, be able to hire employees, those employees will then also be able to establish the type of relationships that I have been able to do. So, what has been the most rewarding thing? I think the most rewarding thing has been to be able to facilitate these relationships. And on the other hand, I am still extremely dissatisfied with how I've been able to do that, or how I've been unable to do that. And I'd like to be able to do that more. Like the whole idea of Unomi, when you talk about the name of Unomi, when I came
You
up with it,
want to dance?
it's a play on words. It's you know me, right? And the idea is that we want to facilitate these personal connections between consumers and producers, um, and so that has been something that I feel that we have not necessarily failed on, but not been as successful as we could. Like I think, for example, the producers should have a greater feeling that they are connecting with the consumers who are buying through Unomi, and how to facilitate that, without like being in the room together and interpreting for people, is a question that is essential to the brand, but has not been successful up until this point.
Mhm.
So if you have any ideas, then
Yeah, if any
bring
of
it on.
the listeners have any ideas, suggestions, we definitely want to hear, because also the association is kind of on the similar in the similar place where we want to also
Yeah.
help the tea farmers to meet the tea drinkers abroad, and also the tea
Well,
drinkers
I actually am a
here
little
to
bit jealous because I think the association is actually doing what I wanted to do in terms of facilitating these connections.
well, we can do it together, Ian.
Yes, definitely. Like the logistics part of the business and the compliance part of the business have kind of like just taken over the business. Like the activity of the business is all about logistics now, and I can kind of see how Amazon has developed as a result. Like just being able to make things smooth for the customer as much as possible. And this year has been just fighting fires with the pandemic, and how the pandemic has made made the international logistics very chaotic. Um, but yeah, so it's more of, it's kind of, and on one hand, it's kind of taken me into a direction that I wasn't intending to go originally when I started in 2013, but at the same time, I think it's also a service that's necessary to help a large number of tea farmers or tea producers reach global audiences and vice
Um,
versa. So
We had a few more questions from earlier on, so I'm just going to show. We have one
sure.
from Nixon, who has been buying from Yunomi, and he says he really enjoyed it. And the question he had is, how do you source all of these tea producers located in various parts of Japan? So very dispersed and very large number of different people. So how does this process of sourcing actually work?
So at first, I would go to these regions. Since my son was born, and my wife and I have kind of a reverse traditional relationship where she works and makes the money, and I take care of the household, and I raise my child. And um, at least on weekdays, she does not have to do any housework or child care at all. She can just concentrate on her career. And so I haven't been able to travel as much as I wanted to this past 5 years. Um, so how do I meet new vendors or new producers? Um, First of all, like I actually get a lot of introductions from other people, other farmers. So I might be working with them, and they have another person who is interested in what we're doing and wants us to help them sell. So I get an introduction. And that's one way I meet people. Larger companies like the factories, I tend to meet them at trade shows. They come to trade shows based in Tokyo. So I meet them there. And when I say large, I mean it's like 15 employees or 20 employees. So they're not large businesses. They're fairly small businesses, but larger than the average family farm, which might have like one or two employees if they're bigger even. Um,
And I
so
imagine
those are primarily how I meet them.
people must be already reaching out to you, right? I feel Yunomi, the name has been really growing and being much more recognized. Do
Yeah,
you
I've
get
actually kind of tried to like I've actually not tried to advertise ourselves in Japan. Um, I'm kind of like trying to stay under the radar in the Japanese market itself.
okay.
Um, um, but yeah, we've been like people are starting to approach us now, so it's kind of like, where did you hear about us? Because we don't have a Japanese website. I don't do any activity in Japanese. For the most part, I actually get surprised when people approach who have no connection at all. So that's a little bit surprising. And right now, I'm a little bit. I'm trying to focus on the system to help people to do this automatically instead of me bringing them on personally. So I've been a little bit I've tried to respond to inquiries, but haven't been so diligent about it.
And we have a nice
So
comment from
apologies if any
Seth.
of those people are listening.
It looks like Seth has also been
Black
getting
tea.
your piece from Yunomi.
So it's interesting. The black tea sampler is the. I'll be very honest. I'm very transparent about a lot of things. Black tea does not sell very well on Yunomi. So Seth, thank you for trying it out. What sells really well on Yunomi in terms of black tea is the sampler. I'm assuming that people are still learning about black teas from Japan and don't really know what to make of it. So Seth, you should, if you like something, you saw some black teas that you liked in the sampler, please, post a review so that other people can learn about it. The specific teas, not just the sampler. Like how to approach black teas in the global market is something that I don't have an answer for yet. Um, so it's something that maybe the Japanese Global Japanese Tea Association can, we can have a session on talking about black teas and
Sure.
how to introduce it to the global market.
Um,
Mostly I see people who are interested in black teas. They're coming to it from the perspective of global black teas from around the world. And the main problem, of course, is the 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 price is completely different. The flavor is very different as well, but the pricing is very different. So how to approach that is a big question, I think,
I think
going
it has
forward.
to stand out by itself, not to be blended in and seen just as another black tea. It's
Yeah,
quite
I
a
would really like to see. I would really like to see the farmers as well as the processors do more experimentation. I don't think that they do enough experimentation. They're trying to. I think we should be experimenting in ways that create new types of teas or new variations that are completely different from what we've seen before. Um, and I see some farmers do it, but it is a big risk for them if they take like an entire lot and do that. So my goal, what I would love to do is be able to get to a scale where we can say, okay, well, try this out, and we'll purchase all 100 kilograms of it, and whether it comes out good or not. So
So I have a funny story from Obubu's life. 1 year they were making just sencha, but something didn't work out with the steamer, so it was just half steamed and became a kind of oolong. And it actually became really popular. People really enjoyed it. So there was a thought what to do, maybe make more oolong. So sometimes all of these kind of glitches are things can push into new directions and new kind of peace.
wait, does Obubu have an oolong now?
So Bubu has been experimenting for a few years
Oh, so still
with
experimenting.
black tea and oolong. I think it's getting to a good place. So there is one tea now called oolong needles in a needle shape, Japanese style.
So one of the problems that I have right now is that we establish, a certain number of products from a company like Obubu, and then it becomes difficult for us to add new products if they produce something new. And so that's one thing that I hope the systematizing will help with. Um, you know, so management of products is more difficult.
So we are actually already at an hour mark, and we haven't been able to go through all the questions that people had. So maybe, Ian, we have to schedule a follow up at some point. We had some interesting questions and some nice comments from the viewers, and it seems you have a big fan base already, and hopefully this will get also to reach more people interested in Japanese tea. So just
Yeah.
in the end, if you have any final comments or just to let people know how to stay in touch, how to follow Yunomi, and how to find these amazing teas that you have been traveling around and sourcing.
So I guess a couple of announcements. Like my plan next year is to there's a lot of business development going on, but I guess the what is most of what will affect people the most is I'm planning on switching the currency of the website to from U.S. dollars to Japanese yen, and then providing multi-currency purchasing. So in U.S. dollars, Canadian dollars, Singaporean dollars, euro, British pounds, Australian dollars. I think if we can do all 7 of those. Um, so people from around the world, you'll be able to purchase in your own currency, hopefully. I still need to figure out whether that affects the point system, but we'll have to think about that. So that's the main announcement. And the other thing is that I probably will set up a specific collection for more untraditional or rare teas, especially like these withered green teas that are not, you could call them like really very lightly oxidized oolongs or slightly oxidized green teas. So I'm really interested in seeing more of that. And I seem to see a lot of farmers are starting to experiment with this idea of slightly withering the tea leaves before they process it, creating like a more complex aroma for the green tea. So I think that will be an interesting trend to watch out for Japanese tea, to see more of this. So please take a look.
Yeah, so we will be excited to see when you have more of these unique, interesting teas on Yunomi. Please keep us updated and posted. To everyone
And
that
also that I will probably be looking for more people to help out with product management in the coming months. So
give us
the
a shout
people in
out.
the Global Teen Association.
Yeah, maybe we can
Good night.
bring on a team of volunteers or supporters who can help with that. So all in all, Ian, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us today and spending this whole hour. It's always exciting to talk with you, and we all, the viewers too, they said they have been learning a lot and they have enjoyed this session. So I hope we can hold more activities together with Yunomi, since we have a shared goal to help the tea farmers to get more of Japanese tea outside of Japan. And to everyone that have been listening, if you tuned in for the first time, we would be glad to keep in touch. So please check out our association. Perhaps if you're interested in becoming a member, joining our community more deeply and more proactively. And if anyone wants to learn more about Japanese tea, we have some courses going on. Some are in person. We are hoping to restart next year, and some are online as well. So anywhere from the world, you can join us. So that's all. Thank you so much, and let's
Thank
keep
you.
in touch. Bye, Ian. Bye, everyone.